Please welcome Dr. Ken Wacks.
Thank you, Ron. Well, thank you. I'd like to tell you about a very engaging session we had on developing the residential gateway as part of our discussion about communication protocols. And by the way, especially for those of you that were in the other session, if you have any questions about anything I say, just interrupt me because I'm just working off a few notes. I'm going to speak extemporaneously about what we did during our session. Now, our session sounded like something I was asked to do 15 or 20 years ago, to talk about communication protocols and standards, and wouldn't it be nice if we had one set of standards that everyone agreed to? Now, who wouldn't agree that it would be nice? The fact is, we tried it. We tried it very valiantly for many years. We tried it on the regional stage, we tried it nationally, we tried it even internationally. And I can say fairly definitively, it's not going to happen in my lifetime, it's probably not going to happen in any of your lifetimes, so that those of you who are especially with a new company that has developed the best communication protocol anyone's ever seen, and you're going to go to your investors and promise them you're going to corner the market, don't come to me for money. Don't ask me to do due diligence. But if you can convince some investors, more power to you. The fact is, companies who have think they have the last word in a protocol end up causing more harm in the industry because they slow down a lot of developments. We actually had one well-known company come to us as we were about to publish an American national standard and say, stop work, we're 12 weeks away from our product, and when it's done, everyone will want it in the world. Your national standard will be irrelevant. We didn't stop work. Their product didn't corner the market. It's still a very worthy product, but that's the reality. So the upshot of what we found was that there are a lot of communication protocols out there, and the whole idea of having different communication protocols is that the physical environment we deal with is different. It may be particularly noisy, it may be particularly long distance, it may be particularly crowded in an unlicensed band, and that's why you need different formal ways of exchanging data. And after all, that's what the word protocol comes from. It's what diplomats did in order to get along with each other without shooting each other. They had formal ways of exchanging documents and bowing and all that stuff. And same thing in communication networks. It's how do we get reliable data communication between 2 points where the communication environment is inherently fraught with problems. It may have limited bandwidth, it may be noisy, and through the astounding discovery made in the late 1940s by Claude Shannon, a professor at MIT, who said even in a hostile environment with the right control and parameters, you can get perfect communication. You can get perfect through the imperfect world. Now that's fairly remarkable, and that's the basis of communication protocols. We concluded in our session that, number one, there were plenty of protocols to choose from all aspects involved with home networking and interconnecting home networks with the outside world. But we will not be able to choose a winning protocol. There is no one or group of winning protocols. And we're going to have to deal with the reality that we need interoperability between protocols, that there will be applications deployed supporting different protocols. If we want these applications to interoperate, then we are going to need technologies like gateways. A gateway is a communication term for interconnecting two dissimilar protocols. We're going to need gateways, and we're going to need especially a focus on applications that make sense across these different home systems. So why do I want to connect my HVAC unit to my lighting system, to my security system? It's not a technical issue. It's a product design and marketing issue. An example, why would you want to connect it? Well, If a fire is detected by a home life safety system, like your smoke detectors and heat detectors, it could, of course, trigger an alarm to the fire department. It could also turn off the HVAC system if you've got a hot air system, you don't want to be blowing around smoke. It could illuminate a pathway out of the house using the lighting system. And it could summon additional services beyond the fire department. If it detects the fire is pretty large, it could actually call an ambulance service through the security system. So there's one example of why you want interconnection among home system applications. So we focused on the issue of the gateway. A question was raised, do we need one gateway? Do we need more than one gateway? Another issue was, what is the value of dealing with official standards? These are standards developed in the United States under the auspices of the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, or developed internationally by organizations like ISO and IEC and the United Nations standards body called ITU, and other groups like IEEE, which is one of the American authorized standards bodies, which has international reach. So all these organizations follow basically a common set of rules. Their meetings are all open. They're open to any company or any country, depending upon the level of the standards body. It's a very deliberative process. It goes through multiple stages. People complain standards take a while. Well, in fact, that's like writing laws. You know, laws in most legislatures go through multiple readings before they're enacted. Same thing with standards. We talked about the value of interoperability. Interoperability is more than just don't step on my toes. That may go with along with the term coexistence. Can we both coexist on the same network without crashing into each other? The second level of interoperability might be interworking. Can I somehow get two systems to work together? But the ultimate is interoperability. Can I use brand A lighting system to turn on the lights on brand B lighting? That would be true interoperability. And in fact, in the international standards body that I chair, we actually published a standard called Guidelines for Product Interoperability that was spearheaded by IBM. Another issue that came up in our group is, how do we get product makers to listen to us? Whether they adopt standards, put interfaces on their products to play with home networks and play with other appliances, or whether they choose specific standards. The key here is to convince appliance makers that there's a business case to be made for putting on an interface in their product. I can tell you from personal experience working with many appliance clients, the popular brands of appliances we have in our laundry room, in our kitchens, these are the so-called white goods. Big kitchen appliances in the trade are called white goods because they used to come in white enameled cabinets. So the white goods makers look at an appliance interface and say, that's another nickel. How am I going to convince the salesman that added another $1 or $10 to the appliance cost? People aren't going to put money into an appliance for a future wish. They're going to put it in because it offers a benefit. So what we determined in our discussions is we need to focus on the benefits. The technology will then flow from the benefits. So in summary, we decided gateways are important. How many gateways will be needed and who supplies them is still being debated. We did look at the International Standard Gateway, which has as a prototypical model a gateway with multiple, think of them as card slots for multiple adaptations to wide area networks, multiple adaptations to home area networks, and optional translation among disparate home networks, in addition to translating between wide area network and home network. So we talked about gateways, we talked about the value of standards. Standards definitely are better than ad hoc, than keeping it private. We talked about interoperability. We all agreed interoperability was essential. And I think one of the things we didn't talk about is how do companies make money and play in a common sandbox. Well, I will mention that about 10 or 15 years ago, a group of major European manufacturers decided to consolidate their marketing effort around 3 competing home system technologies. And they said that they would rather compete on applications than they would on communication protocols. So they decided to agree on the communication protocols and compete on the applications. And I think that's a good takeaway message for all of us when we talk about interoperability. Interoperability should not threaten your bottom line. It should not threaten your argument to your investors that you do have something unique that you're not a commodity, you can command a significant premium for your product in terms of a profit margin. And the final topic along this line was dealing specifically with the very traditional appliance companies, and I would add to this consumer electronics companies. By the way, I work with consumer electronics companies, and I'm going to another meeting shortly with the heads of consumer electronics companies, and I've been telling them about the benefits of working in the energy management space, and they've been telling me if I don't sell $1 billion worth of televisions next year, I'm up a creek. So the basic message is I can't think about new applications unless I know it will generate revenue in terms of sales and profit margins. Remember, consumer electronics makers generally work on very thin margins, especially in the North American market. I go to the Consumer Electronics Show every year, and every year I overhear the salesmen complaining about the thin profit margins and the cutthroat competition in the United States. And guess what? They're back next year. They don't give up on this market. So I think we know the path forward. I think we have to make our technologies work together, and we have to make a good case that there's business to be made because consumers want the applications that result from our interoperable products. So I'll be around today and tomorrow if there are any questions. Thanks very much.